Over to the hardwood, and the NBA is just under 2 weeks away. So what better than to get into the new season by ranking the best players in the league? Two of our NBA experts, Matt Moore and Brandon Anderson, have their top 100 rankings over on actionnetwork.com. You can listen in podcast form, but here's a sneak peek into their top 10. Both are in agreement with Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic as the top two, but after that, things begin to take a turn. Matt has Jalen Brunson inside the top 5, while Brandon has him outside the top 10, and then vice versa. Brandon with Victor Wembanyama at number 5, while Matt has him outside the cut. So let's get into this list and much more in the land of the NBA as we welcome in Matt Moore and Brandon Anderson to the show. Guys, I don't think anyone in their right minds are going to put Luka Doncic number 1 over Nikola Jokic, but say, in a year, maybe 2 or 3, Nikola Jokic is out of that number 1 spot. Is Luka the next successor at that number 1? Matt, I'll kick it to you first.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure he's not number 1 right now. I mean, look, I understand. I put Jokic 1. Feel confident Jokic is 1. The metrics, particularly one called BPM, is going to say that Jokic is number 1, and it's not close. But look, like, Luka is a one-man army. He's got a great team around him. He just made the finals. It's not like Jokic fell off, but I will say this, like, there are little details under the hood of Jokic's season last year where he was a little bit worse around the rim. The defensive rebounding was a little bit down. All of those things. Meanwhile, the Nuggets have gotten a little bit worse. Our perception of these two is going to be closer, if not flipped, by the end of the season. I think Luka is the rightful favorite to win MVP. I think that this is a very close battle right now for who is actually the best or most elite in the world.
Brendan, I'm going to kick it to you. Are you in agreement with Matt? The Luka defense obviously drew such a ton of criticism over the past, playoffs, and now he's right at number 2.
Yeah, look, I'm rarely in agreement with Matt on anything, and this is no exception here. Jokic is number 1. Jokic is in a tier by himself. Matt watches Jokic play basketball in Denver night after night after night. I don't understand how you get to see this happen in real time. The best player in basketball by margin, 4 years running, no reason to believe otherwise, and think anyone is even close here. Now, I do have Luka second, but I have him a clear drop-off. I do tiers in my rankings. I think Luka is closer to being number 3 by good margin than he is to being number 1 here. I don't know that I'm positive Luka will ever be number 1 on the list. I think by the time Jokic does fall off, and he is, you can't stay number 1 forever. He's going to. It could be sooner than later. I think Victor Wembanyama is coming. I think Victor Wembanyama may end up passing Luka for the top spot before Luka ever gets there because of two-way impact. And Luka is a one-way impact guy. And Jokic elevates his teammates and does more to make the entire team better on both ends of the court than Luka does or ever will do. So I don't think it's close, and I don't know if I think Luka's ever going to get there to number 1. Great player, though.
Yeah, we'll put a pin on Victor Wembanyama for just a second. I do agree with you. I think that, in general, Nikola Jokic, what he does to the entire team, Matt, I can't believe that you're in Denver, you watch this guy play, and still think that Luka Doncic comes even close to Nikola Jokic.
I mean, I would argue who better to analyze him than me, than sees him every single night. I don't just catch, a BPM listing on a page or the YouTube highlights. I'm actually watching the details. And I'm just telling you, Luka is a one-man army. I think the point about Luka, about Jokic raising everybody else up by Brandon's really accurate. On the defensive end, I don't know what he's talking about. But I do think that there's something to be said for how there is this evidence, and this is the gap that Luka has to close this year. Jokic makes his teammates better. Luka hasn't done that enough yet. If he gets there, then we can have this conversation. But I do agree that Jokic is the absolute best in the league at making his teammates better.
Yeah, and so one area that I do agree with you is the next topic that we're going to bring up, and one I disagree with Brandon. Go figure, you both disagree with one another. Jalen Brunson is number 5 for Matt Moore. He's number 18 for Brandon on this top 100. That's a 13 difference. 4th in scoring last year. 13th in assists, single-handedly led this Knicks team to a deep playoff run. Matt, I'll kick it to you first. Why do you have him so high? I agree with you for what it's worth, but, tell the viewers at home why he's number 5.
I'm not so arrogant as to completely disregard what the MVP voters said last year, a collection of NBA experts, many of whom I respect and admire, and they had Jalen Brunson fifth. He was an all NBA level guard. How is he down at 18 in this? He's the engine of a team that has realistic expectations of making a conference finals and competing for the Eastern Conference crown this year. Brandon and I are both on the Knicks under, but that doesn't mean that we don't think that they have a shot at actually making a run here if things go right for them. He's a certified playoff killer. There's almost nobody in the league I want more than Jalen Brunson in key high leverage situations late in a playoff game. He's got numbers, he's got wins. What are we talking about here? You don't want him in the top 10? Fine. 18?
I can't believe he's not in the top 10, let alone down at 18. Brandon, the floor is yours to defend yourself, my friend.
Yeah, hold on a second. I need to scroll here to try to get to Brunson in my rankings to see if I can find my notes down here. Oh, there he is. Look, top 5 for a small guard who is nearly turning 30, where guys are going to age out past their prime, from Tibbs, who's running him literally into the ground. It's all sorts of red flags for a one-way guy who I think is more additive than multiplicative, and how he helps the team out, what he does for them offensively, and how he does or doesn't elevate the rest of the team around him. MVP voting and how I'm ranking these have almost nothing to do with each other. This is a ranking of, for me, my top question is, if I was building a new NBA team from scratch and I want to win a title this year, who am I taking? Starting at the top of the list and going on down the list. If I'm taking Jalen Brunson the fifth, my team's not winning the championship. I'm not winning a championship that way. I don't think he's in there. I have Brunson between Donovan Mitchell and Trae Young. And I think if you put either one of those guys into the Knicks situation and had them lead the offense and carry the load the way Brunson did, I think you get a pretty similar result. I think those guys could do a similar sort of job. By MVP voting, for comparison, let me recall Isaiah Thomas. Not the overrated 80s Isaiah Thomas, the more recent Isaiah Thomas on the Celtics. He was fifth in MVP voting one year because he was a small guard on a defense first East team. They won a lot of games. He did everything. He was a certified all the things in the playoffs. He was awesome. He did awesome for them. He was not the fifth best player in the NBA. He was never close to the fifth best player in the NBA or a top 10 player in the NBA. He was a great player in the right spot, in the right scheme. We recognize how valuable he was. By the way, Russell Westbrook won the MVP that year. I guess he was number 1 on your list that year, Matt?
I don't adhere to this kind of like approach. I just can't understand why we're getting into this, like, versus the idea of like what he's actually accomplished. Also, a small guard approaching 30. Did you have Chris Paul 18th when he was 30?
Listen, I'm not going to say anything else about this one. I do want to follow up, though, Brandon, on the, you mentioned Jalen Brunson, a one-way player. And, just by looking at your list in general, it seems like the biggest discrepancy between your rankings and Matt rankings is, defense, right? Like you knock Jalen Brunson for his defense. You look at there's Derek Lively, you have outside the top 100. Matt has him inside the top 60. Jose Alvarado, Jaden McDaniels, 2 great defenders. You don't have them even ranked. Matt has them inside the top 75. So I do want to ask you, how much do you value defense, Brandon, when doing these player rankings?
Yeah, I mean, I think we both value defense a lot. I think the difference here is that we're valuing defense differently. I think I tend to value team defense a little bit more, and what you're doing in a 5-man unit for the team. I think it's interesting. Matt and I argued a lot last year going into the season about on-ball defense, and I argued that it was more valuable, and we saw that sort of play out with Jrue Holiday with regard to both teams, his old team and his new team. We saw how valuable that was. I actually feel like, relative to how I'm ranking guys especially, I care more about the team defense than the one-on-one defense, the on-ball defense. So you look at guys like Alvarado or Jaden McDaniels, it's easy to see the one-on-one defensive impact, and it's easy to get glued to the stopper impact on those, like, that one key matchup in the playoffs. And I know that's when the games matter most, but there's 100 other games the rest of the year also. And I need you to impact defense the rest of the year, and I need you to have an offensive role. I need you to do something offensively. So I do value defense. I think I just value it differently, or see the overall value. Offense is always going to be more valuable, but I'm looking at like team building and how these players fit into my team also.
All right, Matt, I'm going to kick it right to you. Just, looking at your rankings, obviously you took defense into a much higher account individualistically. Why did you, or how did you kind of come to terms with grading each player all together with the offense and defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did value how it fits into the team concept. And Brandon mentioned kind of the Drew Holiday stuff. By the way, the Bucks were fine with Damian Lillard on the floor last year, which is his entire point. But moving on, I do think I factor in a lot of the defensive stuff, and it does matter a lot to me. I think a lot of it is like, how much are you an impact versus a negative impact? If you're a bad defender, that's one thing. Jalen Brunson's never been proven to be a bad defender. That just hasn't been the case. Luka Doncic has been proven to be a bad defender, but he's so awesome on offense it cancels out. And if we really look at it, most of the top players in the league are often negatives on defense. I think measuring defense is the hardest thing, not only for us, but for voters, for everyone, because it takes so much work in the NBA.
Yeah, it really does. And, obviously Luka, it feels like Luka's kind of like if you're taking the subway, that emergency exit door that opens up, you slide right in. That's like Luka. And then you talk about like Victor Wembanyama, you try to like hop the turnstile or something like that, and you just bang your thigh and you end up with a fat bruise. That's Victor Wembanyama. He's not letting you get through. But when you look at this one too, Matt, you have Victor Wembanyama down at 14. Brandon, you have him at 5. So that kind of like flips the whole defensive thing. Matt, I'm curious if his is lower for you, and just because, this is his second year in the NBA. This is him kind of getting used to everything. Is that the case with Victor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to be on the case of these guys will get there. The kids will get there, but they got to do it first. And we did factor in projection into the system. Like that was part of the assignment for Brandon is like, you need to project where you think he's going to be. And I don't necessarily have a problem with Brandon going all in on Victor, because if everything clicks together, then yeah, like that's what this looks like, because the potential is so sky high. A lot of it, I do think, is that his impact is a little bit higher than his skill level, where there's still a lot of things that when you watch Victor Wembanyama, it is sloppy, whether it's turnovers, whether it's his footwork on shots, whether it's his timing on blocks, his presence as a 19-foot defender has an inherent impact on him defensively. And he gets credit for that to a certain degree, but less so for me versus somebody who's going to be very precise with their defensive rotations and know all those sequences. I don't want to be early on the Victor Wembanyama train. I want to be right on time. I was on time on him last year. I'm trying to stay on time where he could be a top 20 player, a top 15 player already in the league and still be like, all right, but these other guys have done it. They've proven it. They need to be ahead of him for now.
See, Brandon, you have him 9 spots higher. You mentioned that he could be the next successor to Nikola Jokic as that number 1, and maybe as soon as next year. Can you just talk about how you came to Victor at your number 5 spot?
Yeah, as far as being early, like I tend to be relatively conservative with younger guys. I let them get there. But I think with Victor, if you look at last season, he almost had like a 3 or 4 year career progression in the season. Like first 15 games, his numbers look like a typical rookie. Lots of inefficiency, lots of struggles. Then like November, December, you're seeing a leap to like, okay, no, this is actually like a good rotational player above average. Then by late December, you've got an all-star. You have like a high-end all-star. And I think from January 1st forward, I don't think I'm projecting Victor to be a top 5 player. From January 1 forward, I think he has been a top 5 player in the NBA already. I think Victor Wembanyama is like multiple standard deviations ahead of any other player defensively. That's what a lot of the underlying metrics show in how the team progressed as the year went on, how he progressed as the year went on. This is me saying I think Victor is so impactful defensively right now already. I think he is a top 3 defense unto himself, and the Spurs will be this season. They are my top win total over in all the Spurs alts. I think he's that good right now. And when the offense comes too, then he moves up to the top of the list. He's already a top 5 player, though.
Yeah, 21 points, 10 rebounds, 3.5 blocks, and an all-defensive first team. You expect that to kind of stay true every single year as long as Wembanyama is able to stay healthy on the defensive end. We talked that difference, about 10 between those. Jalen Brunson, the 5 to 18, which, Brandon, I can't believe you're doing that to me right now. I'm in the Tommy John studio in New York City, right down the street from MSG, and I got to come on here to defend Jalen. But there's other players that you guys have kind of big differentials between, more disagreements. Surprise, surprise. I'll kick it to you, Matt, first. What do you think from Brandon's list that he is most wrong on?
I will say it's great content, but there's a lot of guys that Brandon and I did agree on. Like our lists are the ones that we have opposing views on, we're just very strong on. I'll go Jalen Brown here. Jalen was a player that Brandon absolutely hammered his turnover lines on 2 years ago. And made a lot of money off of Jalen's inability to dribble left. Jalen can dribble left now. Jalen last year, Jason Tatum's the best player on the Celtics. Jalen Brown had the best season of any Celtic last year, relative to expectations and overall in terms of like their contributions to that team's success. That's one of the reasons why he won Eastern Conference Finals MVP and Finals MVP. It was less a matter of how good Jalen is and more a matter of how good Jalen is on the team, which I did factor into the conversation. This is not if you would pluck them on whatever team that they're on. Team context to me does matter. And with Jalen, he has proven to be a great 3-level scorer. His defense is so much better than it was 2 years ago. He really was a weakness. And like I was really kind of pinpointing that consistently when we were handicapping games. It's just not who he is anymore. He's so much better on that end. Jalen Brown, to me, is a top 25 player. He was the finals MVP and the second best player on a team that won 64 games, one of the fourth best SRS last year. His contribution to winning can't really be denied. So that's why I've got Jalen Brown so much higher than Brandon.
Yeah, Matt has him 22. Brandon has him 47. And listen, I'm just here to stir the pot. I know you guys agree on a bunch of stuff. I just like to say that you guys don't disagree because you mentioned it. It's great content. Brandon Anderson, the guy that Matt Moore is most wrong on is who and why?
Yeah, look, Jalen Brown is the best fifth starter on a championship team we've ever seen. I got to give him credit for that. I think the guy that Matt is most wrong about, among so many good choices, you only allowed me to pick one. It's got to be Bam Adebayo, a clear top 50 player for me. Snuck right in there at number 50. Matt has him in his top 20, and I think it is insane to put him in the top 20. I don't even know where to start on it because, for one thing, Jimmy Butler, who we're not going to talk much about here, clearly in everyone's top 20. If you have Jimmy Butler and another top 20 player and everyone agrees the best coach in the league and the best front office in the league, why are you a play-in team every year? That's not how NBA works with 2 top 20 guys annually coaching front office. That's because Bam Adebayo is not a top 20 player. I think this harkens back to the defensive argument that we're having here. And I think it matters too, regular season value versus playoff value. Bam Adebayo as a playoff defender, certainly really valuable. As a regular season defender, certainly really valuable. Matt and I argue about this, but I have Bam as a top 5 to 7 defender in the league. The problem is if Victor is number 1, there's a really big gap from 1 to 5 to 7 in value here. And I don't love what Adebayo brings offensively, and he doesn't make up enough defensive value to make up for the difference of what he doesn't add to the team offensively, and even what he can take away a little bit as far as spacing goes. So, he's shooting threes in preseason. Maybe we will solve that problem. Listen to my tweets a little bit out there. I see you, Bam. Okay. But I think we need to see more offensive value from Bam. Just a defensive value guy can't be a top 20 player for me, not the way the league is in 2024.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Matt has Bam Adebayo 19. You have him 50. I think he might have your tweets pinned up on his wall somewhere, learning to maybe he should shoot threes. But I appreciate you guys hopping on. If you want to listen to more about their top 100, there's the podcast over on Buckets where they disagree, they agree, they laugh, they cry, all of that all together. And who knows, maybe next year we'll have the same discussion and we'll be talking about how Bronny James slipped inside that top 100. Matt Moore, Brandon Anderson, appreciate you guys hopping on. I'll talk soon.
I'm going to go chew raw macaroni. Thanks, Charlie.